One of the key parts of understanding any sport is stats. The same goes for Rocket League. The problem is, stats can be confusing. There's so many things to look at. I don't even know how to filter these. I don't even know what a number is. Don't worry guys, I'm here to help you compare and contrast some stats from last season to this one, so we can gain some insight into who's performing best, worst, and of course, the most average. We've now got 2 regional events under our belt for all regions in the RLCS. As our sample size slowly increases, we can make more informed decisions about what players are playing above and below average. With this information, we can answer some important questions like what are our statistical averages, which players lead each category, who has taken a leap since last season, how much have averages changed since last season, and finally, is your favorite player good or bad? Obviously, I will be able to answer that precisely through the magic of stats and numbers via Octane GG. Now here's a quick look at our stats as an average. This is comparing what we have so far through 2 events this season versus last season, and I think it's important to point out I am only using North America and Europe. If you want more information about where these numbers came from, etc., check in the description. I'm going to put some more information there for you. Now first, let's talk about everybody's favorite category, goals. Last season, we only had 3 players sustain above a 0.9 goals per game, and those were First Killer, Jorias, and Seiko. So far, we have 4 above this mark with First Killer, Jorias, apparently Jack, and Vatira. Last season, Jack had just missed this exclusive club, scoring 0.86 goals per game. His role as primary scorer for the powerful Gen G roster makes him an obvious addition. Jorias continues to score at will, posting the exact same 0.92 he sustained over the entirety of last season. Vatira's move to Carmine Core has improved his dynamic scoring, moving him up from 20th on our list last season to 4th this year with his 0.9 goals per game. Finally, First Killer continues to lead the charge in this category, with his only competition seemingly being himself. First Killer is currently at 1.02 goals per game, outdoing his 1.01 goals from last season. Now let's talk about some players that have had quite a bit of movement from last season to this season so far. First, we're going to talk about Seiko. Seiko had a really slow offensive start to the season, and although BDS have made back-to-back playoff appearances, Seiko's goals per game currently sit at 0.42, which is a substantial dip from his 0.9 last year. Between North America and Europe, he ranked 3rd in this stat for last season. He currently sits at 69th in this category. Ixo has taken a massive leap in scoring. Last season, his 0.64 goals per game put him right about league average. After he and Cash went crazy in Regional 2 as Quadrant scored like gangbusters, Ixo is currently 7th on our goals per game leaderboards. Catalysm has had a rough start to the season in almost every category, but the scoring department stands out as one of the biggest surprises. Last season's 0.62 goals per game made him ever so slightly above average in scoring, and through 2 events, Catalysm has shot 11 of 108, resulting in a gaudy 0.28 goals per game for Evil Geniuses. Last season's Mr. Average was Astral, delivering 0.61 goals per game, and this year Shopify Rebellion's 2-piece owns this honor thus far, delivering 0.62 goals per game. Assists are the hardest stat to come by in RLCS, with massive groups of players mostly residing close to the average. Last season, 6 players held the exact average of 0.49 assists per game. We had 23 players within 0.02 of the average, so up to 0.51 or down to 0.47. This season, we haven't had a clump form quite yet. We only have 2 players right at our average. Those are Explosive Gyro and AJG at 0.48, and only 5 players being within 0.02 of them when we had 23 last season. FaZe Clan continues to share the ball like no other team, with Sypical, First Killer, and Mist all being top 4 in this stat per game. Axel have had difficulty sharing the rock as all 3 players currently reside under the average. Surrounded by higher quality offensive talent, Archie has upped his dimes tremendously, hopping from 30th last season to 2nd in this department. Saves can be a bit misleading, almost like blocks in the NBA. Can they be a contributing factor to a player being a great defender? Of course. Are they the end-all be-all for determining whether or not a player is a good defender? Certainly not. For example, all three members of Solary are currently top 10 in saves per game. Does this mean K-Dop, Shawset, and Fairy Peak are all lockdown defenders, or is their playstyle contributing to inflated numbers? Do you think Mark by 8 was the worst defensive player in the RLCS last season, or was his assignment for BDS one that allowed him to average the lowest saves and still be productive? Saves are a statistical gray area that also offers some of the highest variance, from first place Alpha 54 dropping 2.54 saves per game to Chicago and Arsenal only averaging 1 per contest. Speaking of Alpha, he and Radosin formed an impenetrable brick wall in their surprising semifinal run. Both players are taking first and second in this stat currently. Radosin's former Williams Resolve teammate Prime was our average last season, with the Great One himself taking the honors in our young season so far. In a similar gray area to saves, shots can sometimes be a product of a team's game plan. Some shots are easy to save and are simply put on net to make defenses scramble. Some teams intentionally create shots for star players, while others take shots that come to them through the offensive's standard flow. In any case, shots are up slightly this season from 2.75 to 2.83, the biggest average variance of any stat from last season to this one. Solary's defensive style we discussed in the saves category transfers well to shots, as all three players sit below average, collecting a lot of saves, not taking a lot of shots. Shooters shoot, and so far no one is letting it fly like G1's Atomic, who is peppering opponents' nets with a league-high 3.89 shots per game. This number is very high, but not quite as high as First Killer's season average of 3.98 from the 21-22 season. This year, First Killer has been part of a more cohesive phase attack. He's fallen to 15th in our rankings. Surprisingly, last season's Mr. Average scorer, Astral, was also last season's Mr. Average in shots too. Through our first two regionals, Astral has fallen below the average, and his place has been taken by Rogue's star player, Aqua. Team Liquid have been shaking up their process, as Atau has hopped from the lowest shots per game on the team last year to 4th place in the current stat sheet. Daniel has also fallen nicely into his adjusted role with Space Station Gaming, hopping from 10th to 2nd on our leaderboards. Shooting a lot doesn't translate directly to being a good shooter. Another massive contributing factor is shooting percentage. On average, players make about 22% of their attempts. Some players don't shoot often but make a high percentage, like Mist, who shoots well below the average shots per game, but leads the field, converting 30% of his shots. Some players shoot in volume, but don't make as many, like Delta, who leads Dignitas with 3.49 shots per game, but only converts on 17% of those. Then there's the truly elite combination of shooting with volume while also yielding a high percentage. For example, last year Chicago offered an impressive 26% shooting while taking over 3 shots per game. If we're making up a fake stat for that rarefied shooting air, only 7 players took above 3 shots per game and also had a percentage above 25% last season, those players being Chicago, Seiko, Oli, Jorias, First Killer, Sipical, and apparently Jack. This season, only 6 players currently hold this mark. We're returning apparently Jack, Sipical, and First Killer from last season, and we're adding Alpha 54, AJ, and Vatira. First Killer and apparently Jack are eclipsing an incredible combination of averaging over 3 shots per game and converting on 30+%. Last season we had 2 Mr. Averages with Arsenal, and holy shit, it's Astral again, both shooting 22.3%. This season, the torch is carried by Arsenal alone, as Astral has risen ever so slightly above the average. Combining goals and assists is a great way to get a quick glimpse into who is having the largest impact on the offensive end. Having a high goal participation can certainly show that you are an integral part of your team's output, but like many stats, it has some caveats. While high goal participation is great, if it's too high, it could translate to a player dominating too much of what the team is looking to do, similar to a stat like usage in the NBA. Just as Luka Doncic holds the ball a ton for the Mavericks, this sort of heliocentric offense can sometimes be too much, not allowing others on the team to contribute. Back in the day, First Killer, apparently my favorite player to talk about in this video, caught a lot of flack for manning a heliocentric style with Rogue, potentially limiting the potential of his teammates and the team overall. These days, Rogues still have a similar problem, but with a different cast of characters. Aqua leads the season thus far with an impossibly high 84% goal participation. Being a dominant player last season, Aqua only participated in 67%, which seemed like a stronger balance. On the other side of this extreme, some players are functioning at incredibly high levels while maintaining low goal participation. Torment and Joyo both hover right around 50% this season and last season, allowing their teammates to try and flourish on the ball while they contribute in other elite ways like defense, playmaking, and midfield presence. While AJ has left First Killer Shadow to lead his own team, his participation has hopped from 56% last season to 75th this season, currently third in our standings. Andy has impossibly leapfrogged from 94th place last season to 10th place so far, having a hand in 69% of Dignitas's efforts on the offensive end of the pitch. Last year, Vatira held the honors for most average participant, but so far this year, two North American stars in LJ and JNaps are holding down the line. Encapsulating elements of all core stats, rating is like connecting all pieces of Exodia to make one magical number to show how a player is performing. As a general rule of thumb, if you're above a 1.0 rating, you're doing a pretty stellar overall job on the pitch. Last season, this 1.0 mark comprised 27% of the players in our breakdown. Through two regionals, we have 29 players above this mark, from players like Razebull and Stizzy sitting at a solid 1, all the way up to players like First Killer and Jorias at the top. Players like Matane have seen a massive leap as new situations and game plans afford them new opportunities. Last season's 0.85 rating placed Matane in the bottom 90th percentile of players measured, but this season's 1.1 rating has him neck and neck with players like apparently Jack. As SSG and LJ continue to work out how to integrate with one another, their new player has taken a bit of a hit to his rating. Being the do-it-all star last season for Oxygen provided a comfortable 1.04 rating, and this season's 0.88 is a sign of how things are taking some time to sink. As with all stats, nothing tells the full picture, and numbers could potentially shift aggressively as we gain a larger sample size. Players like G2's Atomic, who delivered an astoundingly poor second regional event, could certainly improve on their 0.88 rating. If you've taken anything away from this, I hope that stats can give some very interesting insights into our esport. I also hope you learned a thing or two about your favorite players and how we talk about them in the broader context. I'm still a firm believer that nothing can inform your opinion like the eye test, so I will continue to bring content discussing in-game play and tournament results. If that's your thing, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video if it was interesting to you. Other great creators you may already know, but if not, are certainly worth checking out would be Buttery Hotness or even Direct on Twitter. They both do a tremendous job of adding insights to the RLCS as we continue to develop. Thank you for your time, and as always, take it easy.